I'd like to keep it as informal as possible, and I think maybe the most interesting format would be if we have maybe Stella will speak for 10 minutes and Stefania will speak for 10 minutes. I'll give a short introduction, but then we have maybe about 30 minutes of Q&A, maybe more, depending if we sort of stick to her. Because to me, I find the questions quite more interesting than anything I've got to say. In that introduction, you said that most of you know who I am. I very much doubt it. I've been in The Guardian for 30 years, and I retired in January, finally. I was best known, at least in The Guardian, for the coverage of Edward Snowden. I went with Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras to Hong Kong and interviewed Snowden and did the stories after that. But before that, I was involved with Julian and WikiLeaks. I was Guardian's Washington bureau chief in 2010 when the first of the Cablegate stories came. And so I wrote a few of the stories, but I was mainly there for the reaction, the angry reaction from Hillary Clinton, the State Department, from people like Joe Biden, who was then a senator and who called Julian a terrorist.
High-tech terrorist.
Exactly right, high-tech terrorist. And so I was involved in that. From the outset, I thought this whole idea of prosecution was ridiculous. This was an act of journalism that journalists and the rest of the world benefited from. And as each year has passed, it seemed more and more, this persecution has seemed more and more ridiculous. I'm not sure where this is going now. It seems astonishing to me that Julian's still in jail more than 5 years on. I was in Washington in December and I was talking to American reporters there, and they said that, the Biden administration was, as we've since heard, maybe considering some sort of deal that would see him free. But the American reporters added a caveat. They said there was no real pressure from the media in the US, and there's no pressure, substantial pressure from US politicians. So the Biden administration, in an election year, didn't feel a need to address this. So if there'd been pressure on them from the US media or from US politicians, maybe that would have changed.
Absolutely.
So I'm not sure. The main pressure in America seems to be coming from the Australian government, and if Biden was going to react to anything, I think that would be the only thing he would really react to. As for the UK, I'm embarrassed that the UK didn't finish this a long time ago. When Gary McKinnon was involved in something, 20 years ago, it was a Conservative Home Secretary, Theresa May, that said he's not been extradited to the US. And I don't understand why the same thing hasn't happened here. If there's a Labour government, can we expect some sort of hope that Keir Starmer is going to...
he was Cameron's DPP, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. He was, yeah. So I don't see any hope there. So the only... I hope maybe Biden will change, maybe the Australian government, maybe through the legal actions that Stella can tell us about here. I've known both Stella and Stefania for 7 years. I met both of them for the first time in 2017. Stefania gave me this copy of the book when it first came out, and she put a quote in. She says, to you, never doubt, it's a quote from Margaret Mead, the anthropologist. She says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. This idea of sometimes you have small groups that sound like the voice in the wilderness or not making an impact. I'm sitting beside two people that have made a real difference. Stella, I met the first time in the Ecuadorian embassy with Julian. She's a human rights lawyer. She's married to Julian. But over the last 7 years, I think she's changed the mood. In 2017, there was a lot of hostility towards Julian. I think Stella, who's been at the forefront of the campaign, has changed the dial. There's more support, not enough support, in the media or among politicians, but the mood has changed. There's more support for Julian now, and I think that's down to Stella. Stefania has also contributed to the change in mood. She's been one of the most persistent journalists in campaigning for Julian. She's been fighting to make his case better known. She's been involved in investigations. She's put down lots of freedom of information requests that have had repercussions. And quite often she's paid for this out of her own pocket. She's not been supported by some big media organisation. She's doing it herself, and she just keeps on going. One of the stories she produced as a result of a freedom of information request showed up the British Crown Prosecution Service engaged in some underhand, dubious practices in relationship to the discussions and negotiations with the Swedish government at the time. The implication of that was that the British government didn't want to resolve this. They just wanted to keep it going. It became a front page in the splash in The Guardian, and that was down to Stefania. And a final point, on the same subject, just last month, John MacDonald and other British MPs have taken this up and asked parliamentary questions about the role of the Crown Prosecution Service in Julian's case, and they have to answer these questions. So I'll hand over now to Stella.
Thank you, Ewan, and thank you everyone for coming. Please get a copy of Stefania's book if you don't have it yet, because it is a forensic reconstruction of the persecution of Julian behind the scenes, and what we knew was happening but didn't have the evidence of it. And Stefania has painstakingly managed to get these documents out of the concerned governments and is fighting to get more. But what we have is already a really telling exposure of the persecution. It's very nice to see lots of new faces as well. And thank you to the BookMarks bookshop for hosting this, because maybe I should do some big picture where we're at sweep to begin with, because I know many of you know this inside out, but some of you may not, and it's important to put things into context. So Julian has been in Belmarsh High Security Prison for 5 years and 2 months now. He has been there continuously. I mean, there's been a few hours in 2019 and 2020 and January 2021 where he was taken to the courthouse. But apart from that, he has been in Belmarsh continuously now since January 2021. He hasn't he hasn't been to the other hearings that there have been since January 2021. In the beginning, the first couple of years, because he wasn't allowed to attend, and the last 2 hearings because he hasn't been in, his health has not been in a condition which allowed him to come to the courthouse. So Julian is in Belmarsh, and he's in a small cell, a single cell, and he is there for over 20, 21, 22, sometimes 23 hours a day. He has limited contact with the outside world. He has no internet. He has visits a couple of times a week. He's able to call his lawyers. He's able to call a list of people that has been pre-approved by the prison, including myself and his brother, his father, and a few others. And he has books. He's surrounded by books, and he calls books his friends because that's where he escapes to with his mind when he's inside the cell. And the prison recently told him he had too many books, and he was in a bit of a back and forth with the prison. They told him he had to get rid of all the books except for 25. And then he said, "Well, show me the rule where it says you can only have 25 books." And they couldn't find
This is Julian.
They couldn't find that rule, and so they said, "Oh well, it's a fire hazard, and so it's a volume issue and a fire hazard." And so he, again in a very Julian way, said, "Well, then you can take my bed, and I'll keep the book." So they took his bed, and he's been on a yoga mat, which sounds like a huge sacrifice, but the mattress wasn't that great anyway, is what he says. So,
Straight proteins.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's surrounded by books, and he's reading constantly when he's well enough to read. That's his I think what keeps his sanity is the ability to escape through books. So during these 5 years in Belmarsh, there has been this court case. An extradition request was put in by the US, and in fact it was put in, the first request was put in December 2017. Secretly, it was a sealed communication to the British authorities, and Julian was arrested in April 2019. So throughout that time, from December 2017 to April 2019, the British authorities were fully aware that the US was after him. And in spite of this, British authorities were continuously making statements that he was just, he would be arrested in relation to the Bail Act, and that he was paranoid and this and that. And of course, this was just a deception towards the public, because they knew full well, and the Judge Snow had already signed the arrest warrant in December 2017. So, Julian isn't just up against the United States, but there has been complicity at the highest levels, and I think Stefania's book has exposed the CPS from 2010, from the beginning, and their role in not just playing their official role, but also playing a political role. And this has been going on in the background, and we only know some of it. During the past 5 years, he's been fighting this extradition to the United States in a completely the case itself is you couldn't come up with a more outrageous and insane case. And if it had come from any other country, it would have been laughed out, and it wouldn't even have reached the courts. The Home Secretary would have thrown it out from the beginning. Julian is literally accused of receiving information from a source and possessing it and communicating it to the public. And he faces 175 years in relation to news gathering and publishing. But not only that, it was in relation to news gathering and publishing information that exposed the criminality of the country that is trying to extradite him. The war crimes, the assassination squads, the torture, what the United States was doing, and in relation to influencing and not just influencing, but interfering in the judicial processes of the Spanish judicial investigations, again in relation to U.S. personnel who had killed a Spanish journalist in Baghdad, for example, German investigation into the torture of their own citizen by U.S. Nationals who were working for the CIA, who renditioned and tortured him in a black site in a case in which he had been abducted by mistake, basically. So WikiLeaks revealed state criminality of the highest order, and there is no question that this information was in the public interest. So you have this. This is what makes the attack, the legal attack on Julian, so brazen. When you have political persecutions in other jurisdictions, it's usually for something else. But in Julian's, so you know, it's a political persecution, it's political prosecution, but there is some excuse that makes it look legitimate, like tax evasion or fraud or whatever. But here, they're outright accusing him of journalism. And so the purpose is to silence him, to bully the population, but also to create a new normal in which doing journalism is committing a crime if the authorities decide to go after you, basically. There's no difference between what Ewen did and what Julian did, except they just decided to go after Julian. And that has of course, a chilling effect. It's a intimidation on journalists to stop them from doing, brave journalism that confronts power. So this is basically what it's about. And over the past 5 years, you've seen a lot written about the case. You've seen all sorts of claims. They come up with the same old attacks that have been, showed to be completely complete bogus. But what's interesting about where we are at now is that as far as the British courts are concerned, there's just one live issue. And, well, it's two, but they're interrelated. And it goes to the essence of the case. It's about whether Julian will be able to rely on the First Amendment or not. And so everything that's been talked about for the past 5 years, very rarely has this issue been talked about, or written about. But it is the essence of the case, and it is, in fact, the only surviving legal ground that is before the court here at the High Court. It's the surviving issue. And just briefly, the Extradition Act bars extradition on very, very narrow grounds. But one of those grounds is under Section 81, and that is that you cannot extradite a person if they will be discriminated against at trial on the basis of their nationality. And the United States, throughout this process, has provided various affidavits and the prosecution, so you can't cross-examine what they say, that the Department of Justice doesn't have to provide a prima facie case to the British courts. They just say, we want this person, this is what we say they said, they've done, and then they don't really have to prove any of it. And they provide sworn statements. And so the prosecutor, whose name is Kronberg, has issued a sworn statement in which he says, he expresses the US's intention to argue that Julian, because he's an Australian national and because he was in the UK and not on US soil, will not be able to rely on the First Amendment. And so this is the issue that the two High Court judges have said, actually, this is a relevant legal point that he should be able to argue in full at the High Court, and that's where we're at. We're waiting for a court date. I expect it will be before the summer recess sometime. The summer recess is third week of July. It could be after, but it could be, in July, and that's there will be a hearing, and this issue of Julian's ability to invoke the U.S. Constitution and its protections for freedom of speech is the issue.
Thanks, Stella.
Thank you, Stella. So thank you thank you to BookMarks Bookshop, thank you to Pluto Press for organizing this event, to Stella, Ewen, and most of all thanks to you for being here. So I'm here, some of them know me, know my work. I'm here to fight what the legendary film director Ken Loach calls a monstrous injustice. This is a monstrous injustice. He writes, this is a book that should make you very angry. It is the story of a journalist imprisoned and treated with unbearable cruelty for exposing war crimes, of the determination of the British and American politicians to destroy him, and of the quiet connivance of the media in this monstrous injustice. This is, in a nutshell, this is what this monstrous injustice is about. I have been working on this case for the last 15 years, not only on this case, of course, but very intensely on this case. And you may ask why a journalist spends 15 years on a case. It's quite rare, of course. On the one hand, the documentation revealed by Wikileaks, by Julian Assange Wikileaks, especially the documentation for which he risks 175 years, the Afghan war logs, Iraq war logs, the cables, Guantanamo files are among the most important revelations in the history of journalism. We have a Pulitzer here. I think he can confirm that this documentation, these documents are among the most important in the history of journalism, together with the Pentagon Papers and a few others. And I remember how exciting it was. Let me tell you how exciting as a journalist to get this documentation for the first time. We could see what the war propaganda machine was telling us about the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and what was happening, what the soldiers on the war theater were reporting. For me, it was a unique opportunity. I know there was a precedent in 1971 when basically Daniel Ellsberg revealed the documentation, the Pentagon Papers on the war in Vietnam. For me, it was the first time. And that was a unique opportunity. We could basically spot the lies. We could expose the lies of the war machine for the first time. It was absolutely exciting for a journalist. So, you have to realize the condition in which we work. We cannot even get the FOI documents. You ask for the documentation, but the governments do not provide the documents to you. So you have to go through years of litigations just to get a few documents. And you have no chance to get these kind of documents. You have no chance. Let me tell you, Italy is a country which has a history of political violence. We had the Red Brigades, we had the strategy of tensions in the 70s, early 80s. We had these fascist terrorists, putting bombs in train stations and killing scores of people. Well, these people have basically tried to get the truth and justice about these massacres for the last 50 years. And they got nothing, absolutely nothing. After 50 years, they cannot get any truth about these massacres. Why? Because behind the scenes, the Italian intelligence services, not all of them, they were not all of them criminals, but there were some elements, really extreme guys on the right who basically provided support, provided help to get these terrorists attacking trains, banks, and killing scores of people. So these people, after 50 years, are still still searching for truth. And they have no chance whatsoever. No chance whatsoever. Why? Because state secrecy get abused to cover up this state criminality at the highest level. So it's the state secrecy abuse, not to protect the security of citizens. No, we are told all the time that this secrecy is about national security. This secrecy is about protecting the security of citizens. But in most of the case, this state secrecy is completely abused. And these documents provide evidence of this abuse of secrecy to cover up state criminality at the highest level. State crimes like war crimes, torture, extrajudicial killings. We have hundreds of thousands of documents exposing this state criminality. So what I call the secret power, which is, is not a conspiracy theory. I avoid using deep state, because deep state in these days is everything. Everything is deep state. Secret power is the military-industrial complex. You can call military-industrial complex as President Eisenhower was calling it. But it is larger than the army, the arms industry, the secret service is larger. It includes part of the diplomatic people, it includes the big tech. Because in these days, you cannot fight wars without big tech. In these days we have, for example, the Google workers, the Google technicians, which are basically protesting about the role of Google in Gaza, in killing massively people in Gaza, So the secret power is bigger than the arms industry and the army and the secret services. And what Julian and Wikileaks, because it was not only Julian, but Julian and Wikileaks did, was to expose this military-industrial complex as no media organization have done before. We know that it was not just about publishing secret documents. Many newspapers, many media organizations publish classified documentation. It's a part, a branch of journalism called the national security journalism. No? But what they did was to expose, to provide billions of people systematic access to classified documents exposing state criminality. And now this power wants him dead. Actually, he's killing him slowly. The important thing, and that's why I have dedicated so many years to this work, and I put together, it took 3 years to write, to put a narrative to all this investigative work. The reason why there is no such large mobilization by the public opinion is that they didn't send killers to kill him. Actually, they planned. In 2017, the CIA, we know that the CIA devised plan to kill or kidnap him. But at the end of the day, they didn't send killers to kill him, as Politkovskaya. It happened with Politkovskaya. So the US and the UK didn't want to appear like in the case of Politkovskaya. So they used the judicial tool. And in addition to this, a demonization campaign so that Julian has not enjoyed any massive public support for a decade. And that's crucial when you want to kill someone without using killers. You need to demonize him. You need that the people think he's a bad guy. He put people at risk. They say the US government is telling us, oh, we are not putting him in prison for journalism, but rather because he put lives at risk. But after 14 years, these documents were published. They cannot mention a single person killed or kidnapped due to this publication. And imagine if they had any evidence. Take the Obama administration. It was not the Obama administration who charged him. It was the Trump administration. But the Obama administration put Julian and WikiLeaks under investigation for 8 years. Now imagine if they had evidence, if the Obama administration had evidence of someone killed or injured due to this publication. Do you think they wouldn't have charged him? Of course they would have, of course. But the Obama administration did not charge him. So it means that they did not have such evidence about the damage, about the people put at risk, the people injured, the people killed. They haven't been able to mention, to bring a single example. So this was part of the demonization campaign. As the rape case, it was part of the demonization campaign. So that people has no empathy. People do not want to support him. He's a bad guy who is violent with women. He is a rapist. So the demonization campaign is one of the reasons why for over a decade, now it's different. Now people, unfortunately, it took the charges. It took, it took the 175 years sentence risk for people to realize, it was about the documents. Now, at the end of the day, it was about the documents. It was not about rape, the rape that never was. It was not about the Russia. Russia has done absolutely nothing for Julian. It was not about Trump. Trump was the guy, he's the guy who basically charged him. So it is about his journalistic work. Ewen and I published the very same revelations. We published the Guardian published the same revelations. I published the same revelations since 2009 for basically over a decade. I was never put in prison. I was never, not even questioned. No, I want to say I had some intimidation. That's true. Some of them scary, but I never want to emphasize this because compared to what Julian has gone through, my troubles were nothing, absolutely nothing. So how can we accept this double standard that we are free and safe, whereas he's in prison? We cannot accept neither professionally nor at a human level, The human level is highly problematic. When I wake up in the morning and I think I can walk, I can work, I can meet friends, I cannot accept he cannot do it. I have a conscience, I have a conscience. And that's why I don't want to give up on this case. And I fight with the only tool I have, the FOI. There's nothing else. I really would like to have a whistleblower from the inside finally leaking the documentation, because 4 governments have been denying them to me since 2015. It is quite something. It means that these documents are dynamite. Otherwise, they would not deny me the documentation. If the correspondence between them was just bureaucratic correspondence between administrations, between government departments and so on, they would release it. Why not? Why to deny it to me? But the fact that 4 governments, Sweden has FOI laws since the 18th century, 18th century, It has denied the documentation, and we discovered that they destroyed thousands of documents. They never admitted. I discovered this only because the UK authorities told me this, They destroyed thousands of documents. Why? Why they destroyed thousands of documents? This is a very controversial case. It's a very important case. If they played by the rules, they should have published the documents and say, look, this is a rape case, and we did whatever it was necessary for a rape case. Don't have any suspicions about us. Look at the documentation, read whatever you want. No, they denied me documents for years, since 2015 until 2023, 8 years. And at the end of the day, we discovered, thanks to the UK authorities, I don't know why they provided this information. Probably since they destroyed their own documents, they didn't want to be the only one who had destroyed documents. So at the end of the day, they said, hey, Sweden destroyed the documents, and we finally got an explanation because, appeals after appeal in Sweden, we didn't understand why they were not providing these documents until we were told that they had destroyed the documents. So 4 governments, Sweden, Australia, United States, United Kingdom, have been denied me this documentation for the last 9 years. It means that this documentation contains the smoking gun of what? The smoking gun of this, of this coordination between governments to keep Julian out of business. And they did it, They took the best years of his life. Even if he will be safe, at the end he will be freed, no one will give back the best years of his life. He was 39 when he published these documents. The Afghan warlocks, the Iraq warlocks, now is 53. They took the best years of his life. And they terrified everyone. That's why we don't have sources. We don't have a manning for Ukraine. We don't have a manning for Ukraine. Very likely the sources are terrified. So that's why we absolutely have to win this case. And I take every opportunity to discuss this case, because the only hope Julian has is public pressure. Nothing else will work. Justice won't save him. You know, appeal after appeal. Of course, they will give him another appeal and another appeal and another appeal, 300 appeals, but he remains in prison. And after 300 appeals, he's still in prison. The law has been used against Julian as, you know, as a tool to keep him arbitrarily detained and finally confined and finally imprisoned in Belmarsh. And they have played by the rule. They have used the law. They haven't sent the killers, as I said. They haven't sent the killers. So unless there is public pressure, Julian won't be free. So we absolutely have to win this case. For Julian, absolutely. For Stella, for their children, absolutely, you know. But we also have to win for us. Because, you know, if we lose the freedom to expose state criminality, we will no longer live in a free society. There was an a famous anti-fascist politician in Italy who said, freedom is like the air. You realize that how vital it is when you lose it, when you start losing it. And if we lose the freedom to expose state criminality, we lose the freedom of living in a democracy. Seriously.
No freedom.
Thank you.